For 40 years, I've walked the line between worlds and am well versed in death. But I want to have faith in humans. Give me something to believe in. Earth below me, sky above me, fire within me. Brought to you by UPRN Network. I'm Trish Mo, and this is The Missing Piece. Good evening. I'm Trish. This is The Missing Piece, and it is Monday, August 29th. I want to wish a happy birthday to my sister today. She's older than me, and I hope she had a wonderful day. So tonight I'm going to do something a little bit different. Well, not different, I guess. I've been researching this. I've been studying them actually all my life. I've had experiences with cryptids and all of the scary things you hear in folklore and legends. And so I wanted to discuss Kansas has so many odd things and so many different versions, I guess, of these things. So I kind of want to discuss that. Let me turn this light. It's very bright behind me. But before that, oh gosh. I just want to say we are broadcasting live on New Orleans 105.3 FM and United Public Radio Network. And I am in the great land of Oz here in Kansas. I also want to thank Carnation for sponsoring me as well as for one of our hours. And first of all, the term cryptid, so many people lately have gotten offended. You get into, which I have native background. I have the witch, the Celtic background, the Irish. Hi, Brian, welcome. And so a lot of that is very personal to me too. Of course, I've also which I'm gonna make. I'm gonna write to them and make a request. I have read the definition of a witch per Merriam-Webster before. Obviously one of the main dictionaries in the U.S. anyways, and that wasn't the only one. There were numerous dictionaries that still to this day depicted all witches in a derogatory manner. So that's something that, especially with Halloween coming up, every religion, every race, every culture, different backgrounds are pretty widely protected nowadays from discrimination and things like that. So it's interesting to me that witches, which is considered, obviously the term witch does not refer to any specific religion within in that practice, but it is something that has been around since the beginning of time. And so I think if we're really trying to change the perspective people have on things like this, then uh, we should also change the literature, in my opinion, because and I don't. I'm used to it. I don't get offended. I'm a redhead. Obviously, I've been teased even before I started going back to my pagan roots. I've been teased about being a witch my entire life. So but I don't get offended by many things anymore. Everyone has their opinions. So, um, I should pull that up to read though. It was really interesting, and I talked about that a long time ago on Chasing Prophecy, I believe. And so it's something. Yes, here it is. This is from, well, this is just the Oxford Language website. And it's the definition of a witch is a woman thought to have magic powers, especially evil ones, popularly depicted as wearing a black cloak and pointed hat and flying on a broomstick. Well, also a verb, cast an evil spell on. So both, again, that's twice. They talk about being evil. Brian said, "You're my kind of witch." Thank you, Brian. Yes, it's so so in both of those definitions, thought to have magic powers, especially evil ones. Um, the original oh, this one actually explains it right on muse.com. Um, which derives from the related nouns Wicca, a female worker of that craft, Wiccan or Wicca, meaning a male Wiccan. Actually, that's not completely correct at all because not all witches are Wiccans. So, um, yeah, every one of these states that we're evil. And I just want to say, oh, here's the Merriam-Webster one. A person, especially a woman, who is credited with having usually malignant supernatural powers. As depicted of course, and coming from Kansas, it's funny. The modern visual image of the folklore witch made popular by the film representation of the Wicked Witch of the West and the Wizard of Oz. But nobody mentions the Good Witch of the East, Glinda. I think that was her name, right? Or the other, she had two other ones too. Um, but she is said to be an old hag with a hooked nose and a mole, wearing a pointed hat and flowing robes and flying on a broom. Um, Once upon a time, the horror story was content to deal with things that go shriek in the night, with mad scientists luring zombies, monsters, ghosts, witches, vampires, and damsels. Um, Fairy tale witches are rude with a tendency to cackle at the misfortune of others. That is not true. I don't ever cackle, for one, nor would I laugh at the misfortune of others. Um, a woman who is believed to practice usually black magic, often with the aid of a devil or familiar. Thank you, Merriam Webster. That's amazing. A woman who believes in the devil. It's interesting. Most witches I know, in fact, do not believe in the devil. Um, these are amazing. A mean or ugly old woman, and to affect injuriously with witchcraft, um, to influence or beguile with allure or charm. So I'm going to start like a petition to get these changed in the damn dictionaries, I tell you. Because it really is. I mean, there's one thing to I am not saying there aren't bad witches. I'm not saying there's bad everything. There's bad humans. Um there's bad Christians and bad, there's good and bad in everything. There's always a balance. So I'm not saying to erase it from history and say they don't, the bad ones don't exist and blah blah blah. No, I'm just saying there should be. You can't just say every woman is evil, and although some men might think this, I must say, but but some women too, for that matter. But I'm saying not all of us. Most witches I know, it's not in our creed to ever harm anything. Um, that has been such a misconception since the beginning of time, for that matter. So I do think we got blamed for a lot of stuff, and in some cases, yes, rightfully so. Um, but tonight, what I'm going to discuss, before I went off on that tangent, why I went off on that tangent was because I knew that if I discuss um, walkers and and other legends that begin with I'm only going to say it once because coming from I grew up in the or in the mountains. I grew up amongst natives, I it's in our belief not to say this word out loud, not to talk about them, not to because they're not considered cryptids. It's considered disrespectful, and even mentioning their name is considered bad luck. So when you speak of the term skinwalkers or wendigos, um, it can be it's something that we were always taught not to do, and and be afraid of and such. So um, that's something that I kind of wanted to go over. Um, and it's mostly due to the native um, North American people. It's they were thought to be always hungry, searching for lost souls. They vary in appearance from myth to myth, and despite the status, it's so far it has never been proven. It is still just a myth. Um, but there have been tons of sightings of these beings throughout history, and especially in Kansas. Kansas has a lot of negative energy as far as history goes. We have Bleeding Kansas. We have the oh my goodness. So since we were kind of the midway point between we are exactly midway point between the east and the west coast. So um when the European settlers arrived and they would cross the plains, Kansas was a place that a lot of people perished here. Um, Not only due to other things, but the weather is harsh in the wintertime. And the weather's ridiculous all the time, actually. Um, but that's something that when you speak of these things, they become that way due to a lot of negative energy in a place. And I have I think a lot of the I think there's such a misconception on cryptids because I think a lot of these are intertwined. When people talk about some of the more um kind of the more negative elementals and forest creatures and Bigfoot and things like that, even the Wolfman, all of those, anything that is seen to be wearing the pelt or the skins or the furs of another animal. Um, and they build these structures and they think they come from these portals and things like that in the forest. Um, I'm kind of, again, being with a native background, I go back to the belief that these beings, everything is energy. So whether it be a negative or a positive energy, what if that is how they manifest themselves to be seen? Meaning gathering the pelts and the furs and everything from all these other creatures. Because in native belief, that's just the thing, that if you wear many of the warriors would wear bear bears or bear hides, bear fur, wolf hide, wolf fox, things like that, if they wanted to. And this even goes back to Vikings and things like that. If they wanted to gain that specific animal's strengths and powers. And so I always considered any of these other cryptids, what you in the forest, what you are what you eat in anything. And so if that's their primary diet, and this goes back to even legends of the gods and things like that, and what you surround yourself with. So for instance, legends of people being raised by wolves, if you're surrounded by that, that is what you become, correct? You become a hunter, you become a predator, you become, I'm sure you would notice things like you would listen more intently. You could probably see better because you were out at night more often. Things like that. And so, who's to say that these beings aren't spiritual energies that literally adapt everything, around them, everything in the forest, and kind of become this combined, and that's why they're seen, with deer, like deer antlers and bear fur and things like that. And so that's my take on it, though. I didn't I'm only going by my experience. I have seen so many things in the forest, and people always ask me, "Well, why?" And honestly, I didn't really think that much about it when I was little and growing up. And people always ask me why I'm always near these things and why I always see them. Well, because I was in the forest all the time. I lived in the forest. Um, if you live in the city, you see more things in the city. But I was around it all the time. So um I think recently, one of the oddest things in Kansas, many of the places I go out in nature all the time, especially with my kids. We go fishing and hiking and things like this. And most recently, um, I'll come back to my vehicle and there'll be gigantic uh, prints on my tailgate or on the vehicle, or like dusty prints that weren't there, 10, 15 minutes prior, and definitely not human. I can post some of those on my group page as well after the show. um I've also seen prints in numerous places. um that happens so often. There has been structures um that I've taken pictures of and shown, and so I didn't even realize that those were so common to me that I didn't realize that that was what people consider a mark of Bigfoot and things like that until we had different researchers on chasing prophecy that explained that, and I was like, "What? I see that all the time in the forest." So I'll put some of those as well. Um, Another one in Kansas, known by the Sioux and the Crow, Native people, are the legends of headless entities called Two Face and the Red Woman. Those actually I had never heard of anywhere until I moved here. Um, I've never seen them. I assume it's similar to a story kind of like the Headless Horseman. They're thought to be a harbinger of a very bad luck if spotted. Um, I mean, I can imagine seeing a headless body, as being a bad omen. Um, those are other ones. One of the main ones I wanted to discuss tonight as well was Sinkhole Sam. And that has been so if you listened to the Outer Realm on last Wednesday, I told at I believe it's 8 p.m. Central Time as well. I which I want to thank again Amelia and Michelle for having me on. It was so amazing, and actually I've never told that story. It was very hard for me, but one of the things I talked about when I moved to a neighborhood, a residential area in Manhattan, Kansas, was um, a giant ditch surrounding my neighborhood, and um, it was really creepy, first of all. I lived close to a man-made reservoir there that's very well known, as well as, one day I was got lost in the woods and came upon a cemetery with only 2, like, there were 4, but there were 2 main, headstones in the middle of this cemetery, and they're said to be, one of a very well-known, I guess, warlock, in not only in the United States, but in the world, which I had no idea. I just happened upon it, which happens to me a lot, obviously. But The big thing about that was the friend I was with when we were going through when I went through these iron gates of this cemetery. Um, I went through fine, and something, like, obviously, audible to both of us, growled as my friend tried to walk through the gate, and so that was I experienced that. That wasn't really odd to me because um, there's the other legends of hellhounds and protectors of things like that. Um, That's happened actually on quite a few occasions. So not to me again because I'm very respectful to any type of as a medium cemetery or burial grounds or war sites, things like that. I'm not saying my friends aren't or anything. It was just I don't know, maybe with the whole witch background or something. I don't know, but something didn't like my friends there. So um, when's the next ghost hunt? Well, and oh, by the way, if you are commenting from Facebook, I can't see your name. I mean, that's fine if you don't want me to, but unless you allow stream, it's a new thing with StreamYard. If you don't allow I don't know, there's some setting you have to allow when you click on the live link. If you don't allow that, then it won't show your name or anything. So I don't know who's talking to me. But when's the next ghost hunt? I'm not sure. I It's hard here to get a ghost hunt together because one, there's very few people that want to do it. Um, two, I'm very picky about who I investigate with and where, for that matter, as most mediums are, because um, we do get taken advantage of a lot as far as being kind of exploited um, and used for that. So um, plus, I have um, I kind of limit my ghost hunts to as far as their frequency because I manifest those things very quickly. And if I start doing that all the time, that is literally what my life becomes. And I attract every single spirit from here to Canada and Mexico, for that matter, and probably halfway across the world. Um, I mean, I'm talking like spirits, demons, cryptids, cold cases. It doesn't matter. They'll just start. I'll start, running across crime scenes and things like that, and it gets to be very overwhelming. So, um, it does take oh, hey, Francisca. Yeah. It does take a lot out of you physically and mentally, absolutely. Even going different places, I when I encounter there are tons of people who search for cryptids and things like that. I don't. I'm probably drawn to these places. They're probably drawing me to these places for that matter. But I think that cryptids are obviously closely intertwined with extraterrestrials. And so a lot of those places, whether it be portals or ley lines or things like that, have an effect biologically on a person. And so they can affect my heart, they can affect my blood sugar, things like that. And so I do have to be careful um, for that. And that's been proven amongst other researchers, whether in the paranormal world or cryptid research, things like that. Skinwalker Ranch. See, I have to say that again. I don't like that term, but that's the name. Um, there's been many people who have had those things happen, and that is the location itself. I believe, depending on ley lines and things like that, are what allows them to travel freely in that area, if that makes sense. So, um, back to Sinkhole Sam. See, there I go. My ADD, ADHD. I saw. So, Sinkhole Sam, longtime legend from the Inman Lake area in McPherson County, Kansas. Legend has it that after the lakes were drained, it left sinkholes behind as shallow puddles. The largest being named the Big Sinkhole. Two men were reportedly fishing in the Big Sinkhole and saw Sam, describing it as a long snake like creature measuring somewhere around 15 feet long and as wide as an automobile tire. But that's not, I mean, so when I think of this thing, I'm like, okay, maybe it's like they talk about people who have imported exotic snakes, giant boa constrictors, pythons, things like that. Kansas has a lot of snakes anyways. I mean, we've got water moccasins and tons of copperheads, rattlesnakes, all kinds of things. Black snakes, you name it. So to me, that could be something that somebody imported, like an exotic or something that was released into the wild, and that's pretty common to happen in places. Um, but this one, it says it's always allegedly living in caverns below the freshwater lakes. Now, for those of you that don't know, Kansas has some of the most extensive underground caverns and tunnel systems, even used by the government to this day. Um, More than I believe almost any other, probably more than any other state in the U.S. Um, some speculated the creature to actually be a Foopengurkle. A Foopengurkle. I have never heard of that, but it sounds like something off a sci-fi movie. Some species thought to be extinct, and there's more evidence. It's really just a giant snake in an underground cavern. But which is ironic. Again, I go back to that neighborhood I lived in, had this giant sinkhole. And it was in Manhattan that I specifically said, like this states, that I hit a pothole that looked like a little puddle and it turned into a giant sinkhole. The ground opened up and ate my car basically. Broke the axles. Um which could happen, sinkholes apparently happen in a lot of places. And the movie that comes to mind, what was it? Holes, I believe. Which is interesting. I think that's the one that did you all just see me jump? That was crazy, like, something just touched my shoulder. Anyways, um, holes are trimmers where they go around digging, there's those giant serpent creatures. Anyways, so I can see this, and what concerns me is that just in the recent last few months, numerous people have reached out to me, especially being the summer, people go camping and fishing and everything else. Um, Numerous people have reached out to me with evidence, not actual evidence of the creature, but with evidence of underground holes or giant underground holes and certain tracks and things like that that aren't like any other animal known to, you know, any common animal known to Kansas surrounding the hole. Um, so that's interesting to me, as well as I have been in different locations where there have been giant sinkholes just randomly in the middle of no. And if you all don't know and aren't familiar, Kansas is the actual location and location based on these stories too for many horror movies. Superman, no, I know Superman's not a horror movie, but Superman, the actual, was said to have landed, in like western Kansas or something. Obviously, most people are familiar with Wizard of Oz. That's what we're famous for. Supernatural was based out of Lawrence, Kansas, and there's so many different horror movies from the 60s, and so there's a reason for that. There's absolutely a reason for that. And the thing is, there's not Kansas doesn't have a very large population. We only have uh, pretty much three cities: Kansas City, Topeka, and Wichita are the biggest. Kansas is a very big state, and there's a lot of small towns, but it's a lot of farmland. And the thing about most of these farming communities and the families that live there have been there for many, many generations. And so what happens in these small little farm towns, sure, they might tell people in the community, but certain information, all of these secrets rarely ever are spoken about to the public and rarely ever get out. So, um that's one thing that was pretty big when I moved here. It's very secretive like that. Um, so the first account of they think it also might be like a prehistoric creature. Um, and the first account came, of course, from two men fishing at a sinkhole. And another sighting claimed that the beast was about 15 feet long. And I don't know why they call it Sam though. But sightings have stopped over the years, leading some to believe it has died. Um, we also have the legend of El Chupacabra. Um, Tanner says there. What is that? There's a theory that old land can attract things. What do you mean by old land? Do you mean land with a lot of history, or where where a lot of things have happened? Because yes, Kelsey. Many nuclear silos. Um, Bleeding Kansas was actually is it the how many years is coming up here? Um, I've never read that book, but I assume it would be very difficult. I've been to a lot of the locations of Bleeding Kansas and obviously seen the spirits and communicated with them from there. And it is difficult. There's a lot of death and bloodshed in Kansas, as I mentioned earlier. Um, I often wonder, when speaking about these spirits that are thought to consume souls, the soul stealers, the soul eaters, and I'm not talking about redheads here, like the ones, the undead. Um, it makes me wonder if um, that's why there are so many of these things here, or if that's the cause. Maybe a lot of these negative things happen because of where we're at, because we're on specific ley lines, because we're on specific parallels, and we are the heartland. So it's just like of course, going back to my pagan and witch beliefs, as within so without, as above so below, because um if you want to attack a person, you you go for their heart, right? Well, Kansas is the heartland, the heart of the United States, the heart of America. So there could be something to that. Um, let's see, Tanner. Uh, there's a couple of definitions. I usually hear it about land that's been in the same bloodline, tribe, or ownership for several generations. That makes a lot of sense because, like I was saying, Kansas has a lot of farmland and a lot of smaller communities and villages, and people from here don't often go other places. I remember knowing people when I first moved here that had never left um, e- even a few 100-mile radius in their entire life. And of course, their land had been owned by every generation of their family um, for hundreds of years, for that matter. And then, of course, back to uh, natives and the different reservations and such. Those have a lot of history as well. So um, that. So land that's been in the same bloodline, yes. So some of these houses have been passed down for multiple generations, which is crazy because as often as I move, I can't imagine living in the same place. And if you're reincarnated in the same family in the next lifetime, then your same energetic signature imprint is just gaining power in that same place, because you're going back to the same place over and over and over. So, um, chupacabra, goat sucker, that's it's also known for. It's known for mysteriously draining the blood from livestock and um, other animals, but I don't know. So one time, this I'll have to see if I can find this. I might be able to find this picture. This was in the fall, almost winter time, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. My parents had a bunch of land, and my dad had trail cameras set up, um, mostly because people would try to hunt on their land since it was very heavily wooded. And they didn't want trespassers and stuff because as kids, like, we used to play there and stuff, and it was dangerous if there were hunters there all the time. But there was a lot of wildlife. Numerous occasions I saw black panthers and things like that, um, at night. He even captured some of those on the cameras, and even a wolf one time. And timber wolves and wolves were very common to Kansas, back in the, I want to say, late 1700s, early 1800s, um, because there was a lot of food here for them. They had the bison, they had the elk herds, many deer. Um, and so there are a lot of big predators. There's even, and of course, mountain lions were distributed probably 25 years ago. Um, I think they brought them back to Kansas, a population of them, to control the deer because we had such a large deer population. So there are bigger animals like that to take into account. Um, but on their trail cam, this thing was living. Okay, it wasn't something found dead, and it was spotted numerous times. And this was back when, like, the hunting cameras and the trail cameras, they weren't good quality. Like, you couldn't get a very decent, I mean, you could get a decent picture and it was black and white. But as far as a lot, sometimes the pictures would come out pretty blurry, um, as far as the motion detected ones. And but they got some pretty clear pictures of this thing, and it looked like a cross between a it wasn't like a diseased coyote, which has often been the case, which people talk about a lot. I was going to try to find here. I know I had the picture of it up before. um, and so a lot of times that's they try to debunk these things as being an animal that's lost all of its hair, or something to that matter. But this was living. It did not move like it was diseased. It wasn't missing hair really. It looked like some type of um mutant animal, really. Um, so I let me bring up what the one that they have. Uh, let's see. Yeah, so this is the closest I can kind of say that the one that they had at their house looked at like, and I'll see if I can bring this up. It's it's crazy, but it was a lot. It was so much bigger. Um, or at least I remember it that way. Um, let's see if I can share my. Every time this happens, I did not know. Y'all know me and technology. Streaming kills me, I tell you. So here we go. So here is, and this is from Palm Beach Post. Obviously, you can see that. Yeah, there's some video playing. That's gonna. This creature right here is what the one looked like, similar to. And see, you can see on the back, it looks like it's missing hair. It looks like something's wrong with this one. Actually, doesn't look. The one that I saw had a huge hunchback. Its its front legs were a lot longer than the back legs. This kind of looks like a yeah, like a coyote or something, that like a wild dog coyote hybrid. Um, but as far as kind of um, the color and the shape, this is almost what it looked like. Um, let me go back. I don't know how to. And so, and it was very big. It was a lot bigger than that. And as I said, we have 100% had timber wolves and wolf hybrids and things like that on our property, because people even breed them, and it's not illegal, or wasn't back then, at least. So that's something that I've seen. Um, there are, which all of this makes me wonder, because um, yeah, yeah, that's what I was talking about, Kelsey. Um, there are animals that get mange and diseases and things like that, lose their fur. But this animal, and if I can ever find it, I'm telling you, it wasn't like that at all. It wasn't losing its hair. It didn't look like some diseased coyote. It was really creepy, actually. And um my parents had numerous ponds on their property. They had, other things, but there's been so many documentaries by uh, government people who currently or uh, worked for the government prior at different places, and they 100% have confirmed different government experiments creating hybrid creatures and releasing them. Now, it always makes me wonder when people find all of these underground bunkers and things like that, if Kansas is one of those locations, because how would we know? So they could be breeding these things and releasing them. And of course, they're not going to live very long. They're not going to thrive, um, if they're just experiments and things like that. But yeah, that could be something, um, that could be happening as well. And another thing in this area, there's been numerous cases throughout time of radiation experiments and things like that as well, which would cause um, some of those mutations, just as it does with people. So if there was a giant wolf that had, some sort of hormonal problem and became overgrown or had three legs or whatever, that's 100% possible. Um, I mean, the pesticides and everything used in the water and the crops and stuff alone causes some of those things in humans for that matter, and in children and that live here. So I don't see why we should discredit it in other things that might be considered cryptids. Um, Now one of the biggest ones. So the Beaman, and it's Beaman. Maybe it's pronounced Bayman. I don't. But anyways, it's thought to be sort of a wolf Bigfoot hybrid, which to me basically sounds like a werewolf. Um, I never found that much on this legend, and it was thought to terrorize farms and livestock the same way a werewolf or Bigfoot's thought to. Um, to me, that just sounds like a regular animal, but but um, I personally know numerous people who have seen a wolf-like man. Um, while driving it. We have a lot of country dirt roads. We have a lot of things like that. A lot of middle of nowhere places. It's like 40 miles to get to any town you want to go to. So, uh, so there's a lot of open space, a lot of places for these things, and I could see werewolves being here, obviously, or lichens, or um, Right, of course you do. Yes. Um, and well, most people in the paranormal community are familiar with Stoll, Kansas. The entire folklore legend of that is said to be one of the seven portals or gateways to hell. And the church there is no longer standing. Um, the legend was that a witch and the devil created a werewolf baby, and the werewolf escaped to the woods. Obviously the witch was hung. The tree used to be there up until i I think the most recent years. I know I visited Stoll when I was in college, like, I mean, that was like 20 years ago. And again, I'm coming from a completely different perspective of most people, because I am a witch. So I'm not going to have the same perspective of you on witches and werewolves and the devil and everything else. Um, I got a very different energy there. It's never been bad. Well, it has not been bad energy from the the perspective of the witch that was hung there. That was a tragedy. What the bad energy came from all of the people, I'm sure, that flock there, and you have satanic worshipers and things like that did horrible things. That's absolutely what drives me crazy about haunted locations, and when people try to go investigating these places, but do so in a disrespectful manner. um, and so after Brian, um, after long conversations, nothing surprised me more with Missouri. Okay, yes, Missouri. I think everything goes in Missouri. But I am in Kansas, Brian. I'm in Kansas. There's a difference. We are not Missouri. Just kidding. Just kidding. So it's kind of a funny rivalry between Kansas and Missouri. I'm not a rival. I don't know. I have family and friends and stuff in Missouri also. Um, 15-minute drive. Kelsey, are you speaking of Stoll? Yes, yes. I agree. It's a sad energy. But what I was saying is, I don't believe the story. I 100% do not believe the legend is correct. As with most legends, they're depicted incorrectly. And I do know um, the energy is sad where the witch was hung, and I think a lot of the bad energy, like I was referring to, came from the negative rituals, the negative things that have been done, the negative thoughts, the negative, all the hate that went into destroying the church, destroying the tree for that matter, um, and even to the witch still this to this day, you know. And so as far as it being a gate, I don't know. I can show evidence of things that um again, my perspective of the devil is different than most people's. So when you say a gate to the underworld, that makes sense to me. A gate to I know the legends of Hecate. Obviously, from a witch's perspective, she's a protector of the underworld, but terrifying to a lot of people. And so, I know from personal experience, one thing with my daughter's highly intuitive, and we went there during the day, a few months ago actually, and I have different videos from it. I have different pictures, things that happened there. And one of the first things she said when we went to, so they've already disassembled. The church was torn down. It was struck by lightning. All kinds of things happened. And then when it finally burned down, um, they disassembled the bricks and moved them to another location, like threw them over a fence on the edge of the cemetery. Well, we were standing by the fence. I've never told my daughter anything about Stoll, Kansas. I've never discussed anything about it with her. We visit cemeteries to respect our ancestors. We, as mediums, are drawn to these places. Sometimes we communicate and aid spirits and different things. It is never disrespectful. We're not performing any rituals or worshiping anything. None of that. Um, and so we were just walking by the fence where these bricks were thrown, and they're just stacked in a pile. And I made the connection, that they were from the church. I hadn't said anything to her, obviously. I was just taking everything in and being quiet. And she looks over and she says, "Oh, hmm, that looks like a stairway." And like the bricks themselves did not look like a stairway. They were just thrown in a pile. She was saying into it, like psychically, it looked like a stairway, which has been the legend forever, that there was a stairway at Stoll that led to hell. Um, so I found that very interesting. Also, I was unaware that visitors were no longer allowed there during the day. It is considered trespassing. It's considered a private cemetery now. And I had been doing my ancestry and research, and I actually tracked ancestors back to, a lot of my family came from Missouri, Kansas, things like that, um, in the 1800s and even before. And so I had tracked some of my ancestors back to Stoll. And while I was in the cemetery, a sheriff stopped us, and he said, "This is the cemetery is off limits. And this was probably mid-afternoon, and he said, "It's considered trespassing to be here now." And I was like, "I apologize. On the website, it still says it's open until dusk or whatever." I was unaware that it's trespassing. I said, "I am, in fact, researching ancestors," which is 100% the truth. But I said this was like I was channeling. I said, "I have some ancestors that used to be buried here." And he literally, I'm pretty sure he turned white because I didn't even realize I said that. But again, everything we say means something and has relevance. So he's like, "Used to be buried here?" I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." I'm like, "Yes, yes, exactly what I said." So, um, whether that means they were moved or whatever the case, reincarnated, or uh I don't know. I didn't stay obviously, respectfully, I left, and, I haven't been back, but that was an interesting day of channeling and interesting I got a lot of messages, um, even some things on our ghost radar about Egypt, which has a lot of connection to the underworld and different, deities, so it was a good trip. I've never been afraid of it. I've never been, I've never felt threatened or felt negative energy in that manner that most people would assume there's something, um, again, I am very, I guess, accustomed to these things, though I have dealt with them my entire life. So most people probably wouldn't have the same experience as me, and they might consider it terrifying for that matter. So, um, let's see, Kelsey, I can understand that. You've never felt comfortable there. I do have many ancestors from around there. I don't feel comfortable in a manner that there were some very bad things done to my ancestors. Yes. But I'm saying as far as myself being threatened by them, no, never. I've never felt threatened there. Now, there is the highway that goes by, actually the highway leading to Stoll. There's a lot of hills, there's a lot of blind turns. That's actually a very dangerous highway. There have been a lot of accidents and things, which also create that energy as well. Um, Joe, what are your thoughts on reincarnation? Um, I 100% believe in reincarnation. Um, there's so many things that I have proven in my own life or personal experience that um that I've had dreams about past lives. I spoke of past lives from the time to my parents when I was like 2 years old, 3 years old. I used to talk about numerous different times where one time I said I was a man and I was in a sword fight and all of these things happened. And I actually have a birthmark where I said that I had been stabbed and I laid there dying. And I was very graphic about it, very detailed. I told the same story every single time. I remember having reoccurring dreams over and over and over about different lifetimes, I guess. And and then I've also encountered people that that had a lot of um kids and things that there's no way they could have known something about a person um who had already passed away or um even animals, I believe, some people are reincarnated as 100% because there's there's no other explanation for it. And there's a lot of things in my own family even um, that lead me to believe in reincarnation. I mean, my family as in ancestors. Um, you know, I follow the same timeline as some of them as far as the day they died, the day they were born, uh, every illness on every time, every injury they got. Now, whether I still haven't determined, I'm still researching this as to whether that is like a generational, like that energy is so strong that caused an injury, when an injury happened or when a death or birth or whatever. If that energy is so strong that it causes that energetic signature in another person of the same bloodline's life, that makes sense to me as well. So, which is separate from the reincarnation to me. Um, I recently, I recently read about a man who severed his finger at some point in his life. And then when he had children, that same finger never grew past like the first knuckle or wherever he severed it. That doesn't mean that they are reincarnated because he was still living. That just means that that put a specific energetic um, imprint on their DNA. So, so there's two different theories on that. As far as I think it can absolutely be set apart from ancestry because I think you can be reincarnated into different bloodlines. But then I also think that there are some souls that are reincarnated into the sun, maybe repeatedly and probably by choice. Um, so so there's different theories there. Let's see. So getting back, I keep getting distracted. Um, the story of the Beaman, the Bayman, I don't know. They think it was a crashed circus train in the early 1900s, and this beast was the offspring of a gorilla. Um, Others say again that it's more like a coyote or a wolf. Um, but they say he escaped the train after it crashed and um, ran free. But I don't I think again like this reference, I think it is worth noting. Cryptids do not necessarily have to have supernatural powers um or huge well-known legends and folklore and stories associated with them. Um I think a lot of cryptids throughout time and have been categorized as such as certain animals that have become extinct. Even and science has proven that some of these things were, like dinosaurs basically, um, or just animals that we weren't aware existed because they were already extinct before our time. And some of them, kind of like finding a unicorn in the middle of nowhere, still exist that we just weren't. There's new things being discovered all the time, or possibly even animals that have evolved. So, um, my thing is, okay, let's go to Bigfoot. So Bigfoot has been seen numerous occasions, numerous places throughout Kansas. And Bigfoot was thought to only reside in the mountains and in forests. And so I think it's interesting that it's very common here on the prairie, it's pretty flat land. Like we don't have a lot of areas that are heavily wooded and again, my theory goes back to these sort of portal areas, vortexes, where things can travel. Um, and Kansas is big. It is very big on that. There's so many locations um, that are like that. So um, another theory I have on cryptids and things that people consider cryptids, in my own experience, because I used to witness things all the time, as I said, as a little girl, and actually even now, people are like, "Your life," just like how anytime a friend or somebody goes in the forest with me, they see something, something happens, and they're like, "Why does this always happen around you?" Well, I mean, aside from me being a weirdo myself and extremely strange, um, of course I attract that. But here's the thing: as depicted in many fairy tales, many Disney movies, um, all of the okay, say like the fairy princesses, it was normal for them in their everyday life to be friends with the gnomes and the fairies and the forest creatures and the all the monsters and things like that. And and they all sang and they all danced and all those things. I do all that in my normal life and, like I said, and go out in nature and stuff to keep my vibration very high. I have to keep my vibration high for one, so I don't die of some, because of course mediums and things like that often and healers and such, if our vibration's low, we get sick and we get, I already have an immune suppressant disease. Um, it would be even worse. And so I purposely keep my vibration high. Also, another reason I keep my vibration high is because I communicate with spirits. And so a lot of people don't understand that when you're going, whether it be looking for cryptids, whether you're looking for um, ghosts, spirits, demons, whatever you're looking for, um, if you have a low vibration, you're going to be vulnerable to that. It's going to affect you. You can pick up attachments, you can pick up negative entities, you can bring things home with you. And so I purposely work every single day on keeping my vibration high and being, you know, I don't surround myself with negative people. I don't typically, um, I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I don't do things, and I'm not judging people that do. I'm just saying from my experience, I have been haunted a lot in my life because I attract that because I'm able to communicate and they look at me like a moth to a flame, literally. And so the time in my life where I used to drink or things like that or be negative, or surround myself with negativity and surround myself in negative places. Again, you attract, you become what you surround yourself with, and you attract more of that. And so I think that some of these things, and it's also been believed with UFO researchers and extraterrestrials as well, when we see orbs, when we see flickering lights, when we see things like that, it is most often this being's Merkaba. So, for instance, people who can see auras, I can do it with people if I really concentrate. Anybody can. You can practice seeing your own aura. Maybe we'll do that sometime. But so people have an energetic color, basically, or like a pulsing, our energy, our frequency, literally. And you can see that on some people. Um, And it's no different with anything else in this universe. You can see it on plants, you can see it on animals. Um, and so these beings, when you see a different colored orb, that's their energy frequency at that time, whatever color it is. And a lot of times that's how a good example, for instance, is some of the ghost radars and things which I don't really use those. I just know I've people have asked me to download them to see how they work and give my opinion, and they will be different colors. Well, it's a lot of people say that those different colors tell you whether it's positive or negative. Whether it has evil intent or not, which is true, and that's true with people. If you see someone, um, well, for those of us who can see that aura, um, certain colors have a lower vibrational frequency. So that's kind of how I judge. But also, the reason we only see orbs because um, in most cases, most beings live in a higher dimension, and their Merkaba, that means their life force, their energy, their um, essence. Um, is moving so fast that the human eye can't possibly detect it. And so some some very high-tech cameras can. That's why you get certain, people when they slow it down it looks like an image or whatever. Um but in most cases the human eye can't possibly um see them as they are because they're moving so fast. And so I think with a lot of cryptids, and elementals and fairies and whatever, gnomes and things like that. Um, the reason I was able to interact and witness so many of them is because I matched their frequency at those times, and and they weren't threatened by me. I tell people that all the time. I'm like, well, of course, none of these things. I don't care if it's a ghost or any of it is going to present itself to you if it's a higher vibrational being, if it feels threatened. And it's the same manner on things that are aggressive. It's like an animal or an insect. I used to be bitten by things all the time. I mean, cats, like dogs were aggressive towards me, insects when I was little because I was afraid and that lowered my vibration. Fear is a lower vibrational um, feeling and energy. And so when I was in that energy, just like hunters and things like that, that's a negative, lower vibrational energy. And so when I was in that energy, it made everything defensive. And insects, just as in demonology and things like that, infestations are a sign of a demon or a lower vibrational entity because these insects are attracted to that lower vibration, just as any spirit's going to be attracted to a lower vibrational being. Any malevolent spirit, I guess, if that makes sense. So, if you want to see these things, um, I would say you can't go tromping around the woods with traps and guns and all of these things. First of all, it's highly disrespectful. Half the time, people when they don't realize that they're like stomping over everything's homes. If you throw a cigarette out, if you litter, if you break off tree branches. Did you know? I'm gonna have to find this video because I have said this all along that plants feel more obviously more than almost anything on this earth because they are rooted. They're rooted to the source. And so there was a video of a plant being like there was construction going on or something, and this plant was almost smashed and melted, almost burned by one of these construction vehicle or machines, and it let out an audible sound of almost music and language. Um, and that's always there. It's just we don't notice it as humans because we become so disconnected from the source. So so when you're walking around and hunting for anything, which by the way, I I've argued this with Bigfoot hunters and researchers and everything else. It's one thing to research, but it's another thing to hunt anything because and I'm not talking about okay, let's get back to that. Yes, I eat meat, so I'm not going to be a hypocrite on that. Um, I'm saying if you're hunting something, not to eat it, but to put its head on your wall, trophy hunters, poachers, things like that, just so you can have the bragging rights to kill something or to cage it, I absolutely am 100% against that. Um, especially if it wasn't harming you to begin with. Um, and so ask yourself if your race, your culture, your family or whatever, if you were the last of your kind and someone was always trying to capture you and hunt you and just destroying your home and threatening your children and um basically all the things I talked about with myself the last week on the outer realm, as far as hybrids go and such. If this was always happening, would you show yourself to anyone? No. No, absolutely not. You wouldn't approach a human ever. Why would you? Why would you? And I don't expect them to anyways because humans are one of the greatest monsters in this universe. We destroy everything, you know just for the sake of doing it, just because we want to, we say for science or to learn more about it or whatever, but i- is that so? I mean, um, so it reminds me, like with Bigfoot, I was talking about how I want one of those Jeep Wagoneer, like the old school station wagons, like in the movie in the movie with the wood grain side, from Harry and the Hendersons. And Harry and the Hendersons was one of my absolutely favorite movies from the 80s, especially growing up in the mountains, because that would have been completely believable there. And um, Bigfoot, he was hunted, but he wasn't aggressive. He wasn't trying to harm anything. He was just trying to protect the other wildlife, trying to protect the forest, trying to, and then obviously when he came in contact with humans and with civilized and domestic life, they it's no different than a bear walking into town or anything like that. Now that I'm older, um, I'll tell a story real quick. When we had in the mountains, and we saw bears and stuff all the time, but one time we had gone on, it was in the summer, we went on vacation to my grandma's and we brought home, we had a watermelon and a cantaloupe that we left in a cooler on our porch. Later that night, there were storms coming in and such, and we heard what we thought was thunder. And it was pretty late. I know I didn't have school because I was able to stay up late. I specifically remember that. Um, But then this noise, it was like it was really loud noise. It sounded like a thumping or a banging. At first it sounded like thunder, and then it sounded like a knocking or like a banging noise. And so my mom opened the front door, and she noticed the cooler gone from the porch because it was right outside our door. Well, she thought, being sometimes in the summer there were more people up there, and she thought maybe teenagers or something had drug it off, stolen it. And so she's outside. I think she was yelling to bring it back, that, bring that back here, like if something was like it was kids. And as she was doing that, there was a bear sitting at the end of the driveway eating the watermelon. And so um, that bear is now a rug at my parents' house. And at the time, we thought it was a threat. We obviously, my dad, they they were hunters and stuff, and again, this was the lifestyle up there, but because bears getting that close to your house, they did consider a threat to humans. Um, but if you change your perspective on that, okay, here's a bear who may or may not have ever had a watch. So say it was a younger bear. I don't know. Um, and sometime in its life, even though its parents and everyone else in the little bear tribe told it not to go around the humans, not to go in their neighborhoods, and not to steal from their gardens. But one day, these teenager bears went and stole a watermelon from the villager's garden, right? And it was the sweetest and greatest thing it ever had in its life. Okay. Well, they live next to each other. Technically, the humans live on their land. It was a national forest where I lived. That was my backyard. There was more forest land, hundreds upon hundreds of miles of forest land, possibly some of it never touched by humans. And so technically we were in the bear's backyard. So here's this fragile creature that comes to live in the bear's backyard, and now it has fruit that you tell it not to touch. So no matter how many times that bear's tribe and parents and whoever, maybe the bear has spirit guides, I'm sure it does, told it, do not go on the human's property. Yes, we know they stole it from you. We know that you were here probably first. We know that uh, they're on your territory. And we also know that you're bigger and can eat them.
But don't go there because they know not what they do. So the bear just can't help it, eats the watermelon, ends up as a rug. And that's why, we set these traps for cryptids. We set these traps for big to capture Bigfoot and spirits and everything else. And we expect them not to harm us in return, which is absolutely ludicrous to me because what happens when you put any animal in a trap? It's going to respond aggressively. So technically, we're triggering it for failure just so we can hang it on our wall. And that's why it's absolutely ridiculous to me. I Going back to why I'm very picky about who I investigate with, who I show things to, things like that, because I absolutely think that a lot of these should be protected, just like any endangered species. So in fact, I did see, there were many debates the last time. There were a lot of Bigfoot. There was a lot of Bigfoot research back in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. Um, and I did find the Parsons, Kansas, the Parsons Sun newspaper. This was from January 25th, 1978. Um, this was in Oregon. So, and the start of the article says, what if, while hiking through the Oregon woods, you stumble across the legendary Bigfoot monster, roped the beast, and took it home? Next, you reported your catch to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Would the agency know what to do? Well, that's interesting because that depends. I guess it depends on that specific, um, who answers that call, if they've had experience with it or not before. But yes, says the agency, and to prove its readiness, it has written a lengthy news release describing just what it would do about your call. But why, you might ask, this is a good question, has the US government gone to such lengths over the possible capture of what, at least so far, is just a myth of long standing? Well, Fish and Wildlife reminds us the gorilla and giant panda were only legends until plaster cast of an 18-inch foot left after the claim seeing Bigfoot in South Dakota. That's true. So again, like I was mentioning, anything that has evolved or there's things that we haven't even discovered yet exist. Um, but the agency did set up a scenario if Bigfoot were to be captured or found, and they said word of its discovery would be flashed around the world within hours. That's the first thing that would happen. Just like UFOs and the fear of that, hysteria, fear, or panic might accompany this news in the area where the creature was located, and then the throngs of curiosity seekers would be captors and others wanting to find Bigfoot would not only create a serious threat to the animal itself, but for the public safety as well. So can you imagine if all of a sudden you capture Bigfoot wherever you live, in your backyard, whatever. Maybe it's caught in a bear trap for that matter, a bear cage. Um, and you make that public. Y'all know in this paranormal community and cryptids and whatever else, people are going to book the first flight to Kansas if that's where it's found, and they're going to want to see it in person. It's going to be a battle of who gets here first, who gets a story, who gets to touch it, see it, smell it, whatever. Maybe who gets to pay the most to transport it, own it. Who knows? Who knows? I can just see the chaos ensuing over that. Um, but that's exactly what they said. And and they said, would such a creature be subjected to the same kind of exploitation as the giant movie ape King Kong? So that's a very interesting government agency related response to something like that. Um, and so it says the Komodo dragon, which is a 10-foot long lizard, wasn't known to science until 1912. I remember running into my mom's house when I was, I don't know, I was probably like 4 years old because I told her I saw, I think I told her I saw a crocodile. A crocodile on the woodpile. It was this big and it was red and black and orange. And she's like, "Oh, wait a minute. There's no red and black crocodile. Even on any of my cartoons, there's no red and black alligator. There's no red and black crocodile." It was a Gila. We had a Gila monster on our woodpile up in the mountains, and they are they have weird teeth. It's not like a normal. They don't have fangs or anything, but they have extremely, extremely powerful mouths and jaws. And it's not their teeth or anything that's the bad part. It's their saliva is highly toxic to humans, and so. And the scary thing about them is their head and their tail are both rounded, so it's a defense mechanism. So both ends look the same, and but they're bright, either black and orangish tint or black and red, and a giant lizard. And so that would look to someone who doesn't know any better. That would look like some mythical creature. Um, and so what this agency is saying. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife, um, they said to be sure, many sightings of today's legendary monsters are misinterpreted reports of even downright hoaxes. But there's more to be said for the existence of a genuine Bigfoot. Not only have there been sightings of the purported 8 foot, 900-pound Pacific Northwest humanoid, but this specific Scammania County, Washington, is prepared to impose a fine of $10,000 and a 5-year jail term on anyone who kills a Bigfoot, if there is a Bigfoot. Last year, the Florida and Oregon legislatures took up bills protecting Bigfoot type creatures, and a Bureau of Indian Affairs policeman has a interior could I think there's something missing there, could help it. After receiving a 120-day temporary protection under the Endangered Species Act, Bigfoot would undergo the humdrum processing for long-term safeguarding, which I think in the event of this discovery of any cryptid, I think would be the best policy because why destroy something that might be the last of its kind, you know? So if in the event that you do find something like this, s- ask yourself before being selfish and thinking first off um, about profiting off of it because I'm sure, and I get that. Like, I get most people, if they have done lifelong research over something, um, that's that's the main goal, is to make a discovery. It's like archaeologists. Um, I get that. I do. I'm just saying the way you go about things, you can still be eventually credited for discovering something. Um, but how it's processed, how it's kind of like the Roswell, and will forever be like the Roswell UFO crash case. Everybody got excited, didn't even think about it to begin with. Um, from law enforcement officers to military to the citizens, the residents that live there for that matter, the people who own the farm, everyone down the line automatically went and was this hysterical. They reported it right away, um, announced it to the press and media and everything else, and then right after, everybody took a step back and everybody's stories changed, and then all of a sudden there's threats and missing people and all these things, and there is still fear. I can tell you, I still have friends, family members, everyone in that area to this day that are scared to death to even talk to anyone about it because they were threatened back then, and nobody wants that. So My question, like, one, I've always asked myself that. I'm like, if I had hard evidence, um, because there's been many times I probably could have gotten tons of evidence, more so than I have. And that was always in the back of my head is when I'm getting this evidence, is it going to destroy something beautiful? Um, is it like, am I giving this creature a death sentence by doing whatever announcing, and it might be innocently, without bad intent from the person doing the researcher, um, but but I think there should be a plan in place, by paranormal societies or cryptid researchers, things like that. Of did anybody ever stop to think what they would do if they actually caught something? You know, so maybe that's something we could work on, and and that's the same concept with people or anything really. If there's less fear of the repercussions, um, if you are unique or something and are found out, then there's more likelihood that we can all that those things can live together, um, and share the world like it was meant to be, opposed to certain people owning parts of it, all of it. So I did like, again, that was the Parsons Sun newspaper from 1978. Um, this man said in closing, he said, we need to consider how big is the Bigfoot population. Do Bigfoot occur anywhere else? Is a Bigfoot population in danger of decline, just like you would an endangered animal? Is Bigfoot's habitat secure? Is the Bigfoot species being exploited? And what is Bigfoot's reproductive rate? So all of those things have to be considered. But for the record, said Keith Schreiner, Associate Director of the U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife. I doubt we'll ever have to do anything because I don't believe there are any of the things around to be discovered in the first place. Hmm. Right. Right. Um, I thought that was interesting. There was another article I found from April of 1982, the Manhattan Mercury from Manhattan, Kansas, and it said spot. It was just like a normal everyday ad, seen in the paper. Spot a Bigfoot, report it. Kind of like you'd see with like a Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters ad, and that was from the National Geographic News Service in Washington. If you spot a Bigfoot these days, you might want to call Bigfoot Hotline. I doubt this number is still in service, 206-382-5656. But he advised that people have been reporting odd creatures for a long time, and sometimes the telling is more fanciful than the creature. Folklorists have been delighted for years by the tall tales told by the American lumberjack, for example, back in the days when woodsmen had to amuse themselves without a TV set or portable stereo. In 1910, William T. Cox, who was Minnesota's first state forester and later its first conservation commissioner, collected the tales of the lumberjacks in a tongue in cheek volume entitled Fearsome Creatures of the Lumberwoods. Walker D. Wyman, a historian at the University of Wisconsin River Falls, reprinted Cox's book as an appendix to his own book. Um, so this is something that has been around for a very, and the debate on what to do in the event of actually seeing or capturing one of these things. Um, there's also the agro pelter, which lives in a hollow tree, snaps off dead branches and hurls them with unerring accuracy at any unfortunate lumberjack who happens to pass by. I didn't know it was called that, but I've absolutely witnessed this. I have friends that have experiences for that matter. Like they'll be standing under a tree and they'll drop a branch that almost hits them on the head, and then they'll move to another one, or move somewhere else and the same thing will happen, or branches actually do hit them. That's happened to numerous people I know as well. And you'll turn around, there's nothing there. Okay, well, again, that goes back to um, the elementals of the forest. And what's another one? It says the tripodero, which has two telescoping legs and a tail like a kangaroo. It can elevate itself to see over the brush and spot a potential meal 10 rods away. To me, see, that one just sounds like a kangaroo, basically. Um, Possibly just spotted in place in a location they weren't known to live. There's the gumbaroo, a hungry creature that can devour a horse in one sitting, and which has a hide so impervious that any bullet striking it will bounce back and kill the hunter. That's an interesting defense mechanism. The hodag, which I've heard about this a lot, especially witnesses from it. A slow, hairless, and intelligent creature whose natural food is the porcupine, which it traps by uprooting a tree and letting it fall on him. That's rude. I mean, that's kind of intense. Um, But that one, I've heard other stories about the hodag, and I'm probably gonna list a my website is almost done. I've completely compiled all of my businesses, all of my artwork, all of my research, my vlog, everything else into one website finally. But it's a lot of work. I do it myself. I do all my graphics and everything myself, so it's taken a long time, and I'm almost done with it. So you will be able to go in the future. I promise I was going to be more organized and give you all of my references, my pictures, things like that I discuss on the show. You'll be able to reference after on that. I hope by next week. So that's exciting. Um, Also, if you haven't watched The Outer Realm from last week, and you want to know more about my story of a very big UFO encounter, um, then visit that as well in the archives. And coming up in September, next week's Labor Day, let me know if you want me to do another segment on some of these areas or cryptids specifically. It might be a pre-recorded show because that is Labor Day, but we'll see. I might do it live. I could go on to I could go on location to a few of these places that I do have prints and such from, and that would be live on location. I don't have the ability to go live like that, just randomly if I'm at the location on UPRN, but I am able to do that on Parapost, so I might do that as well. Um, and and then coming up in September, I'm going to have uh, Corby, Mitline, the psychic and intuitive I had on a few weeks ago, um, back to do readings. Actually, this time she say that she would come back for that. So that is coming up on September 19th. I'm excited about that as well because I absolutely love her. Uh, again, read her books if you are a psychic, tarot reader, anything like that, or interested in getting into that, because she is a woman of such great wisdom and a phenomenal person. And she's absolutely hilarious and such a joy to speak to. But the last time we were on the show, I just wanted to talk to her. I wanted to hear about her background, her insight on everything, her experiences, and so I didn't want her to have to expend that energy, um, doing readings or anything, because it does take a lot of energy. Um, and so she is coming back to do that. So that's exciting. I do have some other cryptid researchers coming on the show as well in the future, and of course other pretty relevant and highly experienced UFO researchers as well. So these are my favorite months coming up. Obviously, the fall, um, and I am more active in outdoor research and things like that because it's not as hot. So, and I'm not going to burn up in the daylight. So um, that's what's coming up for the missing piece in the future. Thank you all for supporting me. Thank my friends for showing up. Thank you for interacting. Thank everyone of my listeners. I never expected this to grow like it has, and I'm forever grateful. um, if you want to be a guest on my show, email me at the missing piece, PEACE, with Trish at gmail.com. Again, I will have, once my website's complete, by next week, hopefully. I do have a booking page, so that will be easier in the future, right? And a forms page that you can communicate with me. Um, I did want to address really quick. I have done a lot of work on missing persons, cold cases, um, crime scenes I've come upon, etc. And I had a whole project I wanted to do with other mediums. I still might. But here's the problem that I have ran into. And I've always ran into this problem, and it's really um it's disheartening, and it's sad. But uh, unfortunately, there aren't a lot of people in the field. Well, for one, there aren't a lot of detectives, or there's not a lot of manpower as far as people being able to work on these cases with us. Um, because there's not even enough for the living, for that matter, for people who are currently still missing, or things like that. So that's sad as well. But there's also, it's so frustrating as a medium because I feel like I've spent half my life, you know, um, yelling to a room full of crowded people, and no one hears me. And that's probably how spirits feel as well. They're just like trying to get someone to pay attention, saying, "Listen, please, I have information about something very important." And nobody's listening, and it's incredibly frustrating. And that's what um, I go through periods where I exhaust myself trying to contact people to pay attention to what might be crime scenes, or what might be cold cases, or what. But the thing is, then they tell me that they have tons of psychics, or people claiming to be, that contact them every day and it never leads to anything, or blah blah blah, whatever. So um, I'm not sure how to approach that anymore. It's exhausting. Um, and it's hard because it doesn't stop happening in my life, obviously. I still feel the need to help lost souls, and um, anyone who who needs help in that area, obviously. But I haven't found people to listen, so that's all I'm going to say about that. Otherwise, if you have a topic you would like me to cover, feel free to reach out as well. And enjoy your week. Have a safe Labor Day, please, if you celebrate that here in the United States. And thank you for listening again. Have a good night.